The exclusive royal luncheon had been designed to project unity, dignity, and calm. Instead, one explosive outburst changed the atmosphere in seconds. Meghan's words cut across the table. Princess Charlotte froze in her chair, and Catherine made a decision no one had expected. Without waiting for permission from the king, the Princess of Wales rose, took her daughter by the hand, and removed her from the gathering, leaving stunned relatives behind, and a monarchy suddenly divided. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had expected the Windsor gathering to steady a family strained by old wounds. The luncheon was more than a meal. It was meant to introduce Charlotte to the pressure of future public duty, where every gesture and seat carried meaning. Around the table sat Camilla, William, Harry, Meghan, Catherine, and several senior royals, who understood that the young princess was being invited into a world of responsibility, not privilege alone. Meghan broke that fragile calm during a sharp exchange about rank and inheritance. She turned toward Charlotte and suggested that the child was being prepared for importance simply because of birth. The remark landed with brutal force in front of the family. Charlotte's face changed, her confidence collapsing into confusion as she looked toward her mother. William gripped the edge of the table tightly, but the future king said nothing. Catherine felt the room waiting for her to endure the insult for the sake of appearances. She refused. The princess placed her napkin beside an untouched plate, stood, and reached for her daughter's hand. "You do not have to remain where you are being made uncomfortable," she said. Charlotte rose without protest, holding tightly to her mother as every conversation died around them. Charles did not command Catherine to sit down. The monarch remained silent, and that silence carried judgment. Camilla watched him, searching for a sign that he would restore order, but the king understood that royal unity had been broken. Harry tried to interrupt, before the moment hardened into consequence. Meghan stopped him and insisted she had been exposing hypocrisy, not attacking a child. Her defense deepened the chill. Catherine led Charlotte toward the doors without looking back. Yet William stayed seated, his eyes fixed on Meghan. He had not remained because he disagreed with his wife. He remained because he was preparing to answer the woman who had wounded his daughter. Catherine had removed her daughter from the room, but the most dangerous part of the luncheon was only beginning, because William had not moved, and Meghan had not withdrawn a single word. Beyond the closed dining room doors, the royal crisis became painfully personal. Catherine was no longer acting as a future queen or a senior representative of the crown. She was a mother guiding a shaken daughter away from adults who had allowed their anger to reach a child. Yet Charlotte's quiet reaction carried more weight than tears ever could. She did not ask why Meghan had spoken that way. She asked whether she had done something wrong. Catherine led her into a private morning room, where no aides, guests, or anxious relatives could watch her struggle. The small space offered something the luncheon had failed to provide: safety. Charlotte understood enough about the family's tension to know that Meghan's relationship with William and Catherine had been strained for years. But the young princess had never been placed directly in the center of that bitterness before. Charlotte looked down and asked whether her presence had made Meghan angry. Catherine immediately knelt beside her. The princess told her daughter that another adult's resentment was never a child's burden, and that she had done nothing wrong by accepting an invitation. Charlotte listened, but the doubt remained in her face. She had entered the luncheon hoping to prove she was ready. Now she wondered whether being there had caused the entire room to break apart. Catherine felt guilt cut through her protective anger. She had argued that Charlotte was mature enough to attend because she believed the family would shield her from unresolved conflict. The princess had trusted the adults at that table to behave with restraint. That trust had failed, and she knew her daughter had paid the price. Charlotte slowly removed the small name card she had carried from the table. The card marked her assigned place at the royal luncheon, a formal meal where seating reflects rank, duty, and family position. She folded it carefully in half and placed it on a side table, as if rejecting the role she had been expected to perform. Catherine watched the gesture with heartbreak. She picked up the card, unfolded it, and placed it gently back into Charlotte's hand. "One cruel moment does not decide where you belong," she told her. The young princess looked at her mother, still shaken, but no longer entirely alone inside the pain. William remained inside the dining room, and his silence was becoming more dangerous than anger. Harry recognized the expression on his brother's face, and understood that a confrontation was now unavoidable. Camilla quietly urged Charles to continue the luncheon for the sake of appearances. The king refused. He told her that appearances had stopped mattering the moment Charlotte became the target. Catherine's decision looked sudden, but it was not born in that room. Meghan had crossed a similar line weeks earlier, and the palace had hidden what happened. Charlotte's folded name card revealed the pain of the present. But the real fracture had begun during a private rehearsal where one warning was ignored. The luncheon outburst was not the beginning. It was the moment a buried conflict finally broke through the palace surface. Weeks earlier, during a private family rehearsal at St. James's Palace, Meghan had challenged Catherine over Charlotte's future position. The exchange lasted less than 5 minutes, but it changed everything. Catherine left with a warning. Meghan left feeling dismissed, and every royal who witnessed it understood that the next confrontation would not remain behind closed doors. Senior royals had gathered to rehearse seating, introductions, and protocol for future national events involving the younger generation. Protocol meant the formal rules controlling where royal family members stood, entered, and appeared during public ceremonies. Catherine and William wanted Charlotte included, so she could build confidence slowly, without being pushed into major duties before she was ready. George was already learning the same system, and his sister's place behind him reflected preparation, not personal worth. Meghan stiffened when Charlotte was instructed to enter immediately after George. She asked why Archie and Lilibet had no equivalent position in the order. The question changed the room at once. Harry looked toward his wife, while William watched his daughter become the center of another argument she had not created. Catherine closed the protocol folder with deliberate calm. She asked Charlotte to wait outside with an aide, then turned back to Meghan. The princess made her warning clear. No child would be used to settle resentment between adults. Charlotte obeyed, but the tension followed her through the door. Meghan heard something harsher in Catherine's words. She accused her of believing George and Charlotte mattered more because they stood closer to the crown. The princess rejected that claim. She explained that the order reflected responsibility, training, and future duty, not love, value, or the importance of one child over another. Harry urged Meghan to leave the issue alone, but his hesitation wounded her. She felt he had failed to defend Archie and Lilibet when it mattered. William reacted differently. The prince became furious that Charlotte had once again been drawn into a dispute about status, especially inside a rehearsal meant to prepare her, not shame her. Meghan turned toward Catherine before leaving. "One day, Charlotte will understand the system protecting her," she said. The words were later recorded in a written account prepared by the senior aide who witnessed the exchange. Weeks afterward, nearly the same accusation would explode across the luncheon table. Charles received that documented account and read it in private. The king chose reconciliation over punishment, allowing Meghan to attend the later luncheon under a clear expectation of restraint. He believed mercy might stop the family from breaking completely. Instead, his mercy placed Catherine and Meghan at the same table, with the warning still alive between them. Charles had offered one final chance for calm, but when Charlotte became the target again, William was no longer willing to accept restraint as the price of family peace. When the doors closed behind Catherine and Charlotte, William remained seated for only 3 more seconds. Then he rose. There was no shouting at first, no dramatic accusation, and no appeal to royal protocol. The future king looked directly at Meghan and asked one devastating question. Why had she chosen to make a child carry the weight of an adult grievance? What followed was not a disagreement over etiquette. It was a reckoning years in the making. William faced her across the table, while the remaining guests sat motionless. Charles did not interrupt. The king understood that royal protocol, the formal system controlling conduct, rank, and behavior inside the monarchy, could no longer contain the damage. Harry moved closer to his wife, torn between defending Meghan and admitting that Charlotte had been visibly wounded. William kept his voice low, but every word struck hard. The prince told Meghan that she could challenge him, criticize Charles, or condemn the institution itself. She could question the crown, attack its traditions, and reject its rules. But his daughter would not be turned into a symbol in that war. Meghan refused to retreat. She argued that Charlotte was already being used by the palace to represent continuity, privilege, and a future denied to Archie and Lilibet. The young princess, she insisted, had been placed inside the system long before the luncheon. William answered that preparation for duty was not permission to shame a child. Harry stepped forward and asked his brother not to turn one remark into a permanent family break. William looked at him with disbelief. The future king said the break had not begun with his response. It began when an 11-year-old girl was made to feel guilty simply for sitting at a family table. Meghan pushed her chair back and stood. William did not move away. Harry placed one hand between them, trying to stop the argument from becoming something neither side could take back. Yet his gesture only exposed how far the family had already fallen. Charles finally spoke. The monarch revealed, through the documented account submitted after the St. James's Palace rehearsal, that he knew exactly what had happened weeks earlier. He had personally ordered that Charlotte never be drawn into the dispute again. Meghan's face changed. She now understood that the luncheon invitation had not been a fresh beginning. It had been a final test of trust. Charles called for the room to be cleared. Camilla and the remaining relatives left in silence, but the king ordered William, Harry, and Meghan to stay behind. The confrontation was over. The consequence was about to begin. The argument had exposed the anger, but only Charles possessed the authority to turn that anger into consequence, and the king was finally ready to use it. The palace had always relied on rules, invitations, and carefully managed access to prevent family tension from becoming public disaster. Yet this crisis forced Charles to confront a harsher reality. Royal protocol had failed to protect his granddaughter. As Meghan defended her words and Harry pleaded for restraint, the monarch made a decision that shifted power toward Catherine. It was no longer enough for the princess to protect Charlotte after an incident. She would be empowered to prevent the next one. Charles dismissed the remaining luncheon guests and kept only William, Harry, Meghan, and his principal private secretary behind. That senior official managed the king's schedule, correspondence, and most sensitive household decisions. Catherine remained elsewhere with Charlotte, unaware that her decision to leave the table had already changed how future family gatherings would be controlled. The king removed his glasses and placed them beside the luncheon schedule. He admitted that he should have acted more firmly after the rehearsal incident. His silence then had been intended to preserve peace, but restraint had only allowed the same wound to reopen. Charles would not make that mistake again. Charles declared that Catherine would hold final authority over Charlotte's attendance at every private and ceremonial gathering, even when invitations had already been approved. Ceremonial gatherings were formal royal events built around public duty, tradition, and official roles. The decision meant the princess could withdraw her daughter without asking the monarch, the household, or any senior advisor for permission. Harry reacted immediately. He warned that giving Catherine such power could turn old resentment into permanent exclusion. William answered with cold certainty. Access to Charlotte, he said, was not a royal entitlement. No title, blood connection, or family history gave anyone the right to place her inside an adult conflict. Meghan refused to apologize for criticizing privilege. She insisted that the issue behind her anger remained real. Yet she acknowledged that Charlotte should not have been personally distressed. Charles listened, but the king said acknowledgement was not enough when the same boundary had already been crossed twice. Charles then delivered the consequence. Meghan would no longer attend intimate gatherings involving George, Charlotte, or Louis until Catherine decided trust had been restored. Harry stared at his father, while the Duchess understood that the exclusion was no longer emotional. It had become policy. Camilla later warned Charles in a private recorded conversation that the decision might make Catherine appear to be the true center of the family. The king rejected that concern. Protecting the next generation mattered more than managing jealousy inside the present one. Catherine did not celebrate when the decision reached her. She listened, held Charlotte's folded name card, and made her first choice immediately. Charles had placed the power in Catherine's hands, but the princess was about to prove that protection did not mean revenge. It meant drawing a line no one could misunderstand. By evening, the luncheon plates had been cleared, but the consequences were spreading through every level of the royal household. Catherine's first use of her new authority was swift. Charlotte would not attend the following week's private family reception, and neither would Meghan. One was being removed for protection. The other was being excluded because trust had collapsed. Yet the most painful reaction came from Harry, who understood that this was no temporary cooling of tempers. A boundary had become policy. Catherine informed the king's office that Charlotte needed time away from intimate family engagements where unresolved adult conflict could rise again. The office handled the monarch's private schedule and official household decisions, which meant her request would affect every future invitation involving the Wales children. George and Louis would also be shielded from gatherings where old arguments might become personal attacks. Harry received the revised guest list in a private sitting room. Meghan's name had been removed from the upcoming reception, while Charlotte's absence was marked as a parental decision. He read the page twice, then lowered it without speaking. The silence told Meghan more than anger could. Harry finally said her refusal to offer a direct apology had given William every reason to close the door. Meghan accused him of accepting the family's version of events and abandoning the concerns she had tried to raise. He answered that defending those concerns did not require pretending Charlotte had not been hurt. William returned to Catherine and found Charlotte holding a book she was not truly reading. The young princess asked whether the entire luncheon had ended because she left. He sat beside her and told her the truth. The adults had failed, not her. Charlotte listened carefully, but shame still lingered beneath her silence. Catherine took the restored luncheon name card and placed it inside Charlotte's book. She told her daughter that the card would remain there until she felt safe and ready to return to royal duty. The princess would not let fear decide Charlotte's future, but she would not force courage from a child still carrying pain. Charles instructed his staff not to blame Meghan publicly. The king wanted private consequences without turning the crisis into spectacle. Camilla later suggested a carefully worded reconciliation meeting, hoping to contain the damage before it spread further. Catherine refused. The princess said peace could not begin through statements, advisors, or controlled palace language. Meghan would need to speak directly to Charlotte's parents, without cameras or intermediaries. The request arrived sooner than anyone expected. Meghan asked to meet Catherine alone. The invitations had been withdrawn, and the household divided. But one final conversation between two women would determine whether the fracture became vengeance or something more controlled. There were no aides, no husbands, and no royal advisors when Catherine entered the small Windsor sitting room. Meghan was already waiting. For the first time since the luncheon, neither woman had an audience to persuade or a family member to defend. The conflict could no longer hide behind monarchy, hierarchy, or public narratives. It came down to one wounded mother facing another, and one question Catherine needed answered before she could ever allow Meghan near Charlotte again. Meghan had requested the meeting after Harry warned that continued defiance could permanently damage his children's private relationship with the Wales family. Catherine agreed only after setting two conditions. The conversation would remain private, and Charlotte would not be asked to attend or accept an apology before she was ready. The princess wanted honesty, not another carefully managed royal performance. Catherine did not waste time. She asked whether Meghan understood why Charlotte had believed she was responsible for destroying the luncheon. The Duchess paused. Then she admitted that she had seen the child's face change the instant the words were spoken. That admission mattered because it stripped away the argument that the damage had been invisible or misunderstood. Meghan explained that her anger had been aimed at the institution and at the unequal futures facing their children. The institution meant the monarchy itself, the system of rank, duty, inheritance, and public expectations surrounding the royal family. Catherine listened, but she answered with painful clarity. Intention did not erase the person who received the wound. Catherine told her that Charlotte had spent years learning to remain composed under pressure. The young princess had been taught to stand still, speak carefully, and hide discomfort in public. Mistaking that silence for strength, she said, had made the attack even crueler. Charlotte had not defended herself because she had been trained not to create a scene. Meghan reached into her handbag and removed a prepared note. She looked down at the page, then placed it face down without reading a word. The Duchess chose to apologize in her own voice. She accepted that Charlotte had been hurt, and that no wider grievance justified making a child feel ashamed of her place in the family. Catherine accepted the apology as sincere, but she did not restore access to future gatherings. Forgiveness, the princess said, did not require immediate trust. Meghan agreed to send Charlotte a short private message, taking full responsibility, without mentioning privilege, Archie, Lilibet, or the wider dispute. The meeting ended without warmth, but not without progress. Yet secrecy was already slipping away. The private conversation had reduced the anger, but beyond Windsor's gates, one image was turning a family wound into a national judgment. The palace released no accusation and named no offender, but silence could not contain what happened. By the next morning, Britain was staring at a single photograph. Catherine leaving Windsor with one hand around Charlotte's shoulder, the young princess looking downward as the luncheon continued behind them. The image did what official statements could not. It made the conflict human. This was no longer an abstract feud between royal households. The public saw a mother shielding her daughter. Palace communications described Charlotte's departure only as a private family matter, and refused to confirm what had been said inside the luncheon. That office controlled official royal messaging, shaping what the monarchy acknowledged and what it kept behind closed doors. Yet broadcasters quickly connected the early exit with the revised guest list for the following week's reception. Private discipline had become a national story. A major morning newspaper placed the photograph across its front page, beneath 4 words, "A mother's line." The image showed Catherine guiding Charlotte away from Windsor, while the family gathering continued behind them. The headline spread because it captured the conflict without needing a palace explanation. One woman had spoken, another had acted. Outside Windsor Castle, a small crowd gathered near the Long Walk, the broad public avenue leading toward the royal residence. One mother held a handwritten sign reading, "Children are not arguments." Television cameras caught the phrase, and within hours it was repeated across broadcasts, radio discussions, and public debate. Catherine saw the front page at breakfast and folded it immediately. The princess asked that Charlotte be shown none of the coverage. She understood that public sympathy could become another kind of pressure, turning her daughter's pain into a symbol, before the child had recovered from the moment itself. Harry watched a television presenter describe Meghan's outburst as the point when public feeling shifted toward Catherine and the Wales children. He turned the sound down, but the judgment had already landed. Meghan stood nearby and understood that any counterstatement would reopen the wound. Meghan chose silence. She honored the private agreement reached with Catherine and released no defense, no accusation, and no new version of events. For the first time, restraint prevented the conflict from growing. Charles then authorized a short palace message, declaring that the welfare of royal children came before attendance, rank, or family expectation. The king did not name Meghan, but the meaning was unmistakable. Catherine now faced the final decision. Charlotte could remain hidden and let fear define the aftermath, or return on terms that restored her confidence. The world had chosen its symbol, a mother leading her daughter away, but the final meaning of that moment would be decided when Charlotte chose whether to step forward again. 2 weeks after the luncheon, Princess Charlotte returned to royal duty. She did not enter a grand banquet or face the relatives involved in the dispute. Instead, Catherine brought her to a small children's charity reception, where the young princess could stand beside her mother without carrying the burden of family conflict. Her return was quiet, deliberate, and deeply symbolic. Charlotte had not been hidden away. She had been protected until she was ready to reclaim her place. Catherine chose a modest children's literacy reception because it centered on service rather than hierarchy, inheritance, or royal position. A royal duty meant an official public responsibility carried out on behalf of the crown and the country. William supported the decision, but the prince allowed his wife and daughter to lead. He understood that the crisis had begun with a mother protecting her child, and it should end with that child recovering her confidence. Charlotte paused before entering and asked whether people would still be discussing the luncheon. Catherine straightened her daughter's collar and looked at her carefully. "They may remember what happened, but they will also remember what you did next," she said. The young princess nodded, still nervous, but no longer ashamed. Charlotte stepped forward and began speaking with children about books, stories, and the courage to find their own voices. Her tension slowly faded. The girl who had left Windsor in silence now stood calmly beside her mother, proving that she had never been removed because she lacked strength. Catherine had taken her away because strength should never be demanded from a wounded child. Meghan remained excluded from intimate events involving the Wales children. Her apology had been accepted, but the princess kept the boundary in place. Trust would return only through consistent private conduct, not through titles, pressure, or public statements. Harry also reached a painful conclusion. He told Meghan that protecting their marriage did not require denying Charlotte's hurt. Reconciliation, he said, would have to be earned slowly rather than demanded through family connection. She accepted that reality, even though the consequence remained difficult. Charles formally confirmed that parents would hold the final decision over their children's attendance at private royal gatherings. The king's ruling ended the idea that palace tradition could overrule a mother or father when a child's welfare was at risk. Catherine never used her authority to punish the Sussexes publicly. She used it to establish one permanent principle: no royal child would be sacrificed to preserve an adult appearance of unity. The luncheon was remembered not as the moment Charlotte was driven from a royal room, but as the moment motherhood came before monarchy. Meghan faced the consequence. Charles upheld the boundary, and the young princess returned without shame. There was no further confrontation and no final palace battle. Catherine had drawn the line, and Charlotte had reclaimed her place on her own terms. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.